We don't subscribe to the old school way, nor the new school way, only the optimal way. The 80-20 Baseball Experience with Coach Bo.
Welcome. This is Coach Bo with the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. I'm here with Colter Bostick. I'm fired up for this episode. We got a guy here who's passionate about baseball. I'm real excited to get this going, so we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to get right into it. Colter, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I cannot thank you enough for having me on. I'm excited about this.
Tell you what, I'm fired up. I could talk baseball, I could talk shop all day, all night, and hopefully the listeners are ready to go here. And now, Colter, I like to hear things out and get into some of the details, but I also like to keep it moving. I think the podcasts that keep moving along are fun, but we also want to hear some things. Let's start off with your backstory. You're from Wyoming. Tell us a little bit about that. I love that area of the country. In fact, I just moved to Boise, so I'm not too far from there. I love that area. Tell me about it.
Well, so I was born and raised in Loveland, Colorado. My dad decided that he wanted to pursue his passion of taking people on hunting and fishing trips in Northwest Wyoming. So he bought an outfitting business. We moved up to Cody in 99, and my house was about 15 miles away from the east border of Yellowstone National Park, which is one of the most beautiful places in the country. And so that's where I grew up. I got to grow up in an absolutely beautiful, scenic place, but the downside to it is you don't associate Wyoming with baseball. And that was my passion from the very first memory that I had was baseball, baseball, baseball. We had season tickets to the original, like when they were at Mile High Stadium for the Rockies. I spent my birthdays hanging out with Dinger, the mascot. Like that was my thing. And we move up to Wyoming and I'm sitting here like, what in the world? This is culture shock for me. My whole thing was I wanted to do everything I could to play baseball. You have to be a multi-sport guy in Wyoming. You have football in the fall, you have basketball in the spring, winter, and then you have a 3-month window to play baseball for American Legion. And that's where I focused most of my time until I was a sophomore in high school. And I started thinking, hey, we've got to do something else. If I want to go play college or if professional is in my future, I need to make the most of this. So I was actually one of the first. I'm not going to claim the title, but I was one of the first people to leave the state to go and play on a select team to go and play fall ball. I ended up having to go and join a team out of Billings, Montana, my first year. I was literally leaving my high school an hour before school got out to make the 2-hour drive to Billings to go and do practice 2 or 3 times a week. And then our tournaments were at least a minimum of an 8-hour drive. If we were going to Denver, if we were going to Spokane or Salt Lake. When people talk about a grind, they think that it's like, oh, I have to go to the gym. I have to do that. No, I'm sitting in a car at 15, 16 years old, driving 8 hours to go and meet my team. And I haven't practiced with most of these kids most of the time because I'm going to meet them to go and play baseball. That's how I got going. And the foundation of basically everything that I do right now in my Maximize Baseball business is it's development oriented. When I was growing up, development was not a concept. It was you go and play. If you're lucky, you get scouted. If you're lucky, you go and play college. If you're lucky, you go play pro ball. Development was just kind of something that you either did or you didn't naturally do. The intricacy that we have in the industry today with the knowledge and the widespread use of information, we didn't have that. When I was done playing baseball in college due to some shoulder issues and whatever you want to blame it on. The truth is I came out of it and I was woefully uneducated about all the intricacies that make elite baseball that I'm sitting there in hindsight going, man, if I had known some of these things, what could have happened to my career? What could have happened to a lot of the other guys that I know if they had this kind of information and training? And I'm down here in South Texas now in San Antonio, and I'm looking at guys that are able to play year round, and I'm watching some absolute stud athletes, but I'm seeing that a lot of these kids are still woefully uneducated. There's a mass of coaching, and I don't blame people for not knowing. I blame people for not trying to learn. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing a lot of these kids still struggling and going because they're not getting the right development. So that's where I've decided to dedicate my career. The direction of my life is to making sure that athletes get to grow.
The Wyoming story, coming from somewhere so distant from baseball is something that I can relate to. I was talking a little bit with you before we, hit the record, and I spent my summers up in Butte. And actually, I have been to the Billings Reds. It's a rookie ball, right? Rookie ball. I have been to some Billings Reds games.
The Mustangs.
The Mustangs, the Billings Mustangs. They were the Reds affiliate for years.
They are still the rookie affiliate for the Reds, yeah.
Yep. Grew up, and then Butte had a team I would go down and almost every night. But I would get up there and I would go to play baseball coming from Southern California, and the fields were still locked up, and it was, still a little chilly, and they didn't have a high school season. So that was interesting because in Southern California, it's like Texas where you're at now. Baseball is everywhere, and it's all year. It's literally 14 months a year. When I went up there, it was kind of interesting to see the fields closed up, in May and June. But yeah, that's a cool story how you came out from there, and I bet you'd love to have some of this information now when you were younger.
Oh man, I would have killed for some of the things that I know now. Our fields were never closed. They had snow on them. I mean, I have gone out and long tossed in the snow more than I knew what to do with, just because, that was the only thing I could think of to do. You get out there, your hands are frozen, and you're throwing like a waterlogged ball, but you can't do it. There's still snow on the ground right now in Wyoming in certain places, and you can't do anything about it. It was 98 degrees today in San Antonio, and there's snow on the ground in my hometown. It's just a completely different world when you're talking about baseball.
Yep, the outdoor sports. The team that was on TV, were the Rockies on TV in Cody, or?
Yes. So the Rockies were on TV just because Denver was the closest thing. Thankfully, we had TBS, which always aired the Braves games. Yep. So Turner Field kind of became a soft spot for me whenever I was watching TV on there. Thank God for the MLB Network when that came out. I started watching some games. But yeah, no, it was pretty much the Rockies and the Braves for some reason. Growing up with the Rockies, I was never going to be disappointed watching a game. I was disappointed with the team consistently. Like, they were the heartbreak in the area, but we always had something to watch, thankfully.
Yeah, they've always had some fun players to watch over the years. I played with Tulo in college. He was one of them, but there was, Cargo, and the Heltons and guys. There was Larry Walker. You had some really good fun players. I'm just touching. Back in the day, Dante Bichette, I know his son's coming up, but there's so many.
Andres Galarraga was my
Andres Galarraga.
Andres Galarraga was so much fun to watch.
Oh yeah, big boy, the big cat. What was he? The big cat?
Yep, the big cat. God, who else did we have that was really fun? They always had some good names. It was always a struggle to get them going. But I loved watching when other teams came to town. So I got to watch Sammy Sosa when he came in with the Cubs. That was fun. I got to watch some really cool players come into Denver, especially in the early years before we moved out, and that was just always a lot of fun.
I would think that team would be a lot of fun to watch offensively, but all I can think of pitching wise is that Mike Hampton contract. But we'll leave it at that.
I will say this, the interesting thing about the Rockies, and this was always a big debate until kind of more modern technology came out, but they were always talking about how the elevation caused problems playing up there. Like, the elevation let the ball carry, so they had the ball in a humidor, and everyone used to talk about how you can't throw a breaking ball up there. After I kept hearing that on the TV and I kept listening to it, that kind of inspired me to start working more and more and more on my breaking ball. I'm like, if I can throw a good breaking ball in this elevation in Wyoming and Colorado, God only knows what it'll do when I go down to a better elevation and I can throw it in Texas. And thankfully, my curveball is one of my better pitches.
You made something out of it. That's the kind of vibe I get from you. You just got a positive vibe, and you're trying to make the most of what you got. And speaking of that, you're down in San Antonio. You got Maximized Baseballs, your business, your company. On your website, it says right up front on your website, it says that you are specializing, or the Maximized Baseball specializes in the creation of the complete athlete, which encompasses the body, the mind, and the future. Maybe you could break down each one of those a little for us, the body, the mind, and the future.
Yeah, so I'm going to hit on the first one, the complete athlete first. So the whole idea is, I don't believe that there is a single philosophy that encompasses everything about this game, especially in a developmental manner. There are so many different ways to skin a cat when it comes to developing a baseball player. So I look at the complete athlete is the embodiment of a holistic philosophy saying, I'm going to do whatever it takes to be the absolute best version of myself as an athlete. When we're talking about the body, the mind, and the future, the body is the development of the body is, are we doing everything we can in a strength and conditioning manner to make my body as optimal as it can be? Are we doing everything we can in terms of nutrition and sleep to know my body the best so that I can get the most out of it because of what I'm doing in the gym and whatnot? Am I doing everything that I can to learn my body from a biomechanical standpoint and how I move to optimize what I'm capable of doing? If I can get all three of those components together, my body is going to be really, really good, and I'm going to do the best that I can. And that doesn't matter. It does not matter if I'm talking about a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old. All of these things go together. 10-year-olds, maybe we don't need to be worrying so much about how much you're deadlifting or something, but we do worry about, are you moving properly? And most of the time, coaches are the ones that screw up kids' movements. These kids move because this is the way their body tells them to move, not how a coach has told them to move. And when we start messing with that, we are actually taking away their freedom of their natural habits that get to express who they are as natural athletes. My job is to sit here and look at a guy and say, all right, what do we need to know about you before we start changing things or we start altering things? The body has so many intricacies that the way I talk to player A, player B, and player C can be completely different, and that is perfectly fine. But it is my job to know how to speak to all three on a different level. So that's the body. The mind is perhaps the greatest separator. It's, do you have the mental capacity to do the best job? Are you working on yourself from a mental toughness standpoint? Are you working on yourself from a baseball IQ standpoint? You can be the toughest guy in the world, but if you don't know what to do in a certain situation, how good are you going to be? Or you can be the smartest guy in the world, but if you don't have the ability to control yourself under pressure, why would I put you in a situation that you could possibly do damage? There's always that give and take. You have to improve all aspects of your mental game. One of my, I want to call him a friend. I want to call him a mentor. He's probably one of the biggest influences I have in this game is Alan Jaeger. His conversation about the mental game, getting yourself right in the mind, meditation, focus, everything, breathing. The mental game is the biggest separator in baseball.
Let me jump in real quick. Colt, look, if you can see that on the video, we got the video going here. I got Alan Jaeger's book here, Getting Focused, Staying Focused. This original copy. My last podcast episode, I talked about this book. I recently moved up to Boise from Southern California, and I was unpacking my stuff last week, and I came across that book. I'm with you. You're talking to somebody who's really, the J-band stuff, I'm not as big a fan as I definitely think there's a use. Absolutely. And I had all my pictures. When I work with pictures, I have them get a J-band or some kind of elastic tubing. I think there's definitely some great uses. In fact, I got a video on that on my website that actually shows something that it's not even I've ever heard it talked about, but it's really great for glove side control, front side control. But I'll tell you one thing that Alan Jaeger's book, what you just said about the, it's called The Far Eastern Approach to Sports and Life for you listeners. So I know you're familiar with it. That's so, when you say that and then you talk, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about Alan Jaeger and, hear a lot about Alan with the long toss and you hear a lot about him with the J bands. But I'll tell you what, the long toss is something that I don't know, how do you take long toss and trademark that? That's been around since the beginning of baseball, I'm sure. And tubing, the elastic tubing is kind of something that's, is what it is. It's been around. It's effective. I think it's a little over. I think it gets a little more hype than maybe it should. I definitely think there's some uses. But the one thing that Alan doesn't get a lot of credit for is mental game approach. You know what I thought was interesting about what you said about the mental game? You said they have to have the acumen. They have to understand the situations. They have to know what's going on in the game. And then, so it's kind of like the logic and the kind of the thinking each situation through. And then you also talked about, and this was really cool how you said that. Then you talked about there's kind of part two was the emotions, the pressure. So you have the tension, the pressure in the muscles and the body and the breathing. And then you have knowing the situations. I love how you broke those two things down and kind of said, these are the two things we hit with the mind. But that's cool. You talked about the Alan Jaeger. Sorry to interrupt you. I want you to finish up on the mind, but yeah, you said that and I got the book literally right next to me. I had no idea you were going to bring that up.
The truth is I think of the mental side of the game as the glue that holds you together. If you can do everything else right, but if what's happening between the ears isn't at peak performance, you can't be at peak performance. You are hoping, you are praying for luck to be on your side if you are not ready to go between the ears. You nailed it on the head. Alan does not get enough credit. I think the industry still doesn't entirely fully embrace or fully comprehend the values that come from the mental game. But the J bands, I love them. It's a standard piece in what I have every guy do. The long toss is a standard piece in everything that we do to keep the arm healthy, build the arm. It's all great. But Alan in the mental game, he definitely needs an even bigger platform. And what he's done for the game, especially just even as a mentor for me, no one gives it enough credit. And he needs more and more credit for it, I promise you.
That's good stuff. So did you want to finish up on the mind or did you want to now move to that third part, the future?
Yeah. So, the mind is pretty much there's a lot of different pieces that go into it. But I mostly think about it in terms of IQ, in terms of toughness, and in terms of like just the ability to compete. Where are you as a mental competitor? And we'll go into this in a little bit because I'll bring back to it. But there's a difference between like relaxed and intense competitor. There's percentages, there's variances and whatnot, but there's a consistency in there in terms of the direction of your competition. Are you flowing, or are you having to create the highs and lows of your performance? And there's a lot into that in the mental side. And once again, it can be applied to 10, 15, 18, 21, 30. It applies to everybody. There's a reason why there are sports psychologists being paid a lot of money for Major League Baseball players, because they need it more than anyone else because they're playing at the highest level. It's not just for teaching high school kids to be more mentally tough. It's a very valuable piece. But then the final piece is the future. That goes kind of back to everything else, is why are we doing this? Are we playing the game just to be in the moment, or are we working towards something? If I'm working with a 10-year-old kid, why am I working with him? Because I want him to be successful when he's playing at Little League, when he's playing at, I guess, whatever the next stage Pony League is between there, when he gets to high school. I want him to go to college. I want him to have his education paid for. If he's worked himself to that position, I want him to go play professional ball. I want these kids to understand that we are not here to live in the moment. We have to perform in the moment, but we have to set goals and we have to know where we're trying to go with this game. Because if we're just doing it just to pass time, that doesn't get my juices flowing, and I'm definitely not going to be as invested in somebody that doesn't really want to have a future in what we're doing.
I think that's a great point. I think coaches can take that and learn from that. If you're just going out there to spend some time out on the field with your players, coaches, I think you're really dropping the ball in a lot of ways, where there's got to be, I think of sports on the youth level as just an unbelievably fun and enjoyable vehicle to prepare our youth for the struggles and challenges and things that are going to happen in the real world in life that come down as being an adult. Don't just go through the steps. Have a why, and I love that. Have a why. I really believe in being in the moment, but you can't just be so in the moment you lose your direction. You have to have a direction and then back to the moment. What are you working on today in this drill with Coach Bostick? What drill am I doing today, and why am I doing this? What's the purpose? Where is this funneling to?
Absolutely. Are you familiar with the concept of hard and soft focus?
Hard and soft focused. You know what? There was a guy, Mark Devine, who's a Navy SEAL. He does SEAL Fit. He talks about being in the moment, and then he talks about breaking away from that, and then looking. I want to say I just read about this. I'm not too familiar. I'd love to hear a little bit from your experience with it, but you piqued my interest, definitely.
Well, so hard and soft focus are basically, are you broadly focused, or are you intently like narrow focused? So that's how I think of it. Is like soft focus means like I've got the big picture in front of me. Hard focus means I've got my singular target, singular goal. And I think of hard and soft focus in terms of scaling. So when I'm on the mound, or when I'm talking about a guy being on the mound, I'm telling him, hey, you can have soft focus all you want to until you touch that rubber. But when you touch the rubber, it becomes, what is my job? How am I going to execute? And am I going to do it to the best of my ability? Hard and soft focus in the moment. When we're talking about practice, yeah, we have to have our hard and soft focus, understanding, hey, I don't need to be so intent here that I miss out on the concept, but I'm realizing that the practice is the soft focus, because the hard focus is, can I take these skills that I'm learning and put them into game? It doesn't do me any good if I'm really good in practice and I can't perform in a game. I have to be able to do this. You take a step back again. The practice is whatever. The game is whatever. That's the soft focus. If I'm not working myself towards another goal, which is the hard focus, what's the point of doing it? So everything is scaled according to what your goals and your focuses are. And that's kind of how I perceive my world and my life. And that's what I try to impart on the athlete.
That's awesome. And somebody who's been studying Zen for almost 20 years and meditate every day, the hard, soft focus is awesome. That, just to hear that from you. I did an episode a while back about the mental game, and I grew up actually with Ken Ravizza, considered the godfather, him and Tom Hansen. I got the original Heads Up Baseball book right here. This is the original one. It literally has on the inside cover, it says, to order this book, send in a check to a P.O. box. It's from the early 90s when I got that book. So, it's almost 30 years old. And I studied under Ken in high school. He came to our high school and all 4 years of college at Long Beach State. Now, as much as I love this stuff, I think it got overcomplicated. I love your hard and soft focus. I think that just talking about some of that stuff, competing out there, and just kind of keeping it I like how you explain it, because I think the kids can take that. Like somebody goes, well, I played with Jared Weaver in college, and Jared Weaver didn't really work out that hard, and he didn't really, he kind of just went through the motions with a lot of things, but he had genetics, and that dude could compete. He was so uber competitive, and he won 150 games in the major leagues. He was the National College Player of the Year. I think he won like 35. He was like 35-7 in college. He dominated in college. he literally got by with the competition or the competing. So I just love how you talked about those three things, kind of knowing the game, controlling the emotions, competing, and then the focus, the hard and soft focus. That's good stuff. So listeners that are hearing that, I think you should go check out Alan Yeager's book. And I'm going to have you back on, Colter, if you don't mind. I'd love to have you come back on and just do a mental game. Talk about the mental game for 30, 45 minutes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and let's get this straight. I am in no shape, form a mental game guru like Alan. And if Alan were to hear me talking like this, he'd be like, Colter, no, like you got to have flow. You can't have the highs and lows. Like soft and hard focus are highs and lows in that term. And I love the fact that you brought up Zen. One of the first books he ever told me to read was The Way of Zen by Alan Waits. And Alan Waits or Alan Watts, one or the other. That book, like, the first time I read it, I was tripping over myself. I was like, what in the world is this? But then the second time I read it, and after I talked it through with Alan, it made way more sense. Like there's a state of flow in terms of, hey, nothing deviates. It's all a matter of this is what's supposed to happen. But I mean, I have to look at it in terms of hard and soft focus, in terms of the scaling, like I was talking about. But no, I would love to have that mental game conversation. Heck, I'd even like to get a hold of Alan and see if we could like double team this, because he brings way more perspective to it than I can. But I would love to do something like that.
Absolutely, that would be fun. Let's plan on doing that. For you business people listening, I kind of think about the hard and soft focus when I hear this from Colter. It kind of makes me think of you can't work in the business and on the business. It's hard to work. You gotta, if owners, these CEOs that talk about how they were working in the business so much that they had to step away and bring somebody else in to kind of run the business because they were so into it, or they had to kind of divvy up the task and delegate the little tasks they were programming and or whatever, and they needed to step out of it. You got to have both. You got to be able to work on your game and in your game. So you kind of have that direction like you're talking about. So you kind of have like, where am I going with this? What's the goal? Like you said, goals, what's the goal? What's the purpose? What's the why? Where am I headed? It also kind of recalibrate along the way where you're going, your compass, kind of check the compass. I don't sail, but I guess if you're on a sailboat, you're going to check that compass, but every once in a while, but you're checking all the rigging, you're checking to make sure everything's good on your boat, and then you're checking that compass. All right, am I still headed? So kind of soft, hard focus. I think kind of into it and then kind of pulling yourself back from it a little bit and looking at it from like a little bit more of a 30,000 foot view is kind of a term we hear a lot about now. So you're in it on the ground level, in the trenches, go, go, go. Not your focus, and then you're branching away. That's good stuff. Now let's get into the third part, the future. So the third part of the complete athlete that you guys do at Maximize Baseball.
Yep, the future is the advancement. What are we doing? Yeah, we're trying to be the best that we can here, but we're trying to prep ourselves to then be the best at the next level. When we're in high school, we're not just trying to make the varsity team. We're trying to make the varsity team as a freshman. We're not just trying to win a state championship. We're trying to catch the eye of a dream school, make sure that we're getting a scholarship. Scholarships, I have to say this just as a disclaimer. Scholarships are not an indication of your true value. They are an indication of the financial component of going to college. But if you're sitting there trying to say, hey, the only way I'm going to go to school is if I'm getting a scholarship, I think you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And I have to always explain that to my kids. Scholarships are great. If there is a scholarship available, awesome. But you have to go where you're going to be best suited for your future. And that's a major component of the future is what is going to be the best thing for you. Are you going to a school that is going to help you develop not only as an athlete, but as a person and get a good degree that you can fall back onto and have a life? Or are you going somewhere because, hey, man, someone offered me a lot of money to go play baseball, but I really have no interest in anything else I'm doing? If you're going to be short-sighted, it's not really the future. It's the now, and you're going to get lost in it. After that, once we're talking about secured going with your future for college, if we're lucky enough and fortunate enough, we're talking about, hey, we're going to try and get drafted. Or, hey, once you go to school, you're going to continue your development because you want to go play professional baseball. The future is always building on your goals, and it's a never ceasing thing. It's actually one of my very first mentors in this game. His name is John Matlack. Played for the Mets and the Rangers back in the day, and was a coach for the Tigers for a long time. And he always asked me the question, and he always wanted me to bring it to the athletes, is how good can you really be, and when will you ever find out? Are you ever going to know how good you can be until it's done? No, you can't. You're only going to find out how good you could ever be once it's already over. You have to try and push the limit until you find that point.
Oh, I think that's great. put the routine together, go see Coach Bostick, whatever it is, what do I got to do today? If I could go back now, one thing I would do is do the holistic, the body that you talked about, kind of the sleep. I would have taken that more serious. I get up early every day now, except on the weekends. Monday through Friday, I'm up at 4:45, 5 o'clock, and I start my day, I work out, and I go, I meditate. And if I could go back and do one thing different, that's what I would do. And I love how you're teaching that to the kids and the young athletes, because it's not just going out there. And if you're eating Cheetos, and you're eating, that, not that you can't. It kind of goes back to my website's 80-20 baseball. Yeah, I always say my diet is perfect 80% of the time, and 20% of the time it is what it is. But when I was playing, it was 20% good, 80% terrible. And I think if you can just have it, kind of flip-flop. All right. With Maximize Baseball, do you work with all players, or do you, I know I see a lot of great stuff you're putting out there on Twitter with pitchers. Do you work with pitchers or, all players?
Primarily pitching. That's what I did. That's where my passions really lie. If I'm being completely honest, what I'm doing is I'm trying to help every athlete that I can. In terms of what I don't talk about things that I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't know in this world, but if I've got a kid that comes and says, "Hey, I want lessons on hitting," I'm going to say, "Don't talk to me. I can tell you what I'm going to throw you. I can tell you the weaknesses that I see in your swing, but don't ask me to try and teach it to you, because I'm not qualified, and I'm definitely not going to take that burden to possibly hurt your future. I know guys that are really good at teaching the swing." In terms of arm strength, I think that pitchers are the best guys to go and ask about arm strength. We're the ones working on it most of the time. There's a difference between athleticism and arm strength. That's why you get a shortstop that's got a crazy good arm that doesn't really know how to pitch. There's a little bit of a difference there. But I've got kids that come to me asking me to help them with their arm strength and whatnot. Last year, I worked with a kid or a couple of years ago, I started working with him, and he ended up getting drafted in the 3rd round last year. I take no credit for his swing. I take no credit for his God-given ability to be an athlete. And I definitely don't take credit for the fact that his arm got better. He had a great work ethic. But we talked about that complete athleticism. We talked about building his skill set. We had a lot of mental game talks. It ended up paying off, and he got drafted, and he's having a phenomenal, well, right now he's not doing anything. But, he's off to a really good start in his professional career, and I attribute that to the conversations that we had. But I'm not going to take credit for things that I did not do.
Yeah, so you work with pitching, but like you said, it transfers over to arm strength too. I've worked with some guys. I worked with a guy who just was finishing up his senior year at Pepperdine, and I coached him in high school. Heck of a great player, and he came to me for arm strength. I wasn't going to talk about his swing or fielding ground balls. We a little bit. We know stuff about it, but there's other people that's their specialty. But that arm strength is something I think. So if people are listening to this and they can get a hold of you, or they're in your area, I think an arm strength component would be a great thing to reach out to you about, even if you're not a pitcher right now, because if you can't throw, that does limit a little bit. Obviously, you want to be able to hit and you want to be able to catch and run and things like that. But the arm strength is a big plus. You could probably do a training program just on arm strength that has nothing to do with anything that goes on the mound.
Yeah, 100%. There's certain principles that carry over just in general. Like when we do plyo balls are building up your decelerators. I mean, you need to have healthy decelerators if you're a shortstop, a catcher, a center fielder, or a pitcher. Long toss, you need to be able to have that arm strength and arm durability behind any position you play. You need to be able to have good functional rotational actions when you're throwing a baseball from any position. All those components, you just happen to elongate them and put a constraint of a mound. You become a thrower. I think, there's a lot of value to that.
Awesome. All right. So you work with pitching specifically. I know you're putting a lot of great stuff out on Twitter. I see that a lot. I don't do any of the Facebook very much. I post some stuff on Facebook, but I just get so bombarded with stuff. But I like Twitter because I got 3 or 4 people that I really like to follow. And I follow a lot of people, but they're really just putting out good content. And I love how you're positive with those pictures. It seems like those guys are getting better. And I love your before and after videos. I love how you before and after. Hey, this is where we were a week ago, and this is where we are now. And this is what I'm looking at, and this is what we did, and this is how we did it. That stuff's really cool. Now, speaking of which, maybe you could give us you gave us a little bit of a success story there with a 3rd rounder that, you worked on some of the arm stuff. And now, what position did you say you played?
He was a center fielder.
Center fielder. Okay, great. I'm sure you had multiple coaches maybe that he was working with, but you played a part in that with the arm strength and things like that. Maybe you could share a couple specific success stories that you've had, maybe a younger player and maybe more of an advanced player, maybe just kind of the synopsis of it,
okay.
And maybe a couple things that really kind of stood out with the training of it and the development, more from your end working with them.
Absolutely. So I want to start off with the younger player. I want to be absolutely clear about this. When I'm working with a youth player, my job first and foremost is to make sure that they still enjoy what they're doing. If these kids aren't having fun playing at 8, 9, 10, 11, we are not giving them an incentive to want to keep playing. My job is to make sure we embolden that confidence, the fun characteristics of the game. But there is a certain level where you say, hey, winning is fun. So if we get really good at what we're doing, you're going to have a lot of fun because you're going to keep winning. I work with one kid. He's 10 years old. They started pitching at 9U. His family decided, hey, we want to kind of get a step up. We want to start learning the pitching development a little bit early. So I started working with him when he was 8 years old. And as we kept going, like, it was mostly about teaching the bare minimum fundamentals, just getting him in the right direction and understanding it. But when he started getting into the game, he wasn't going to be the hardest throwing kid. He wasn't going to dominate from a skill standpoint yet. But I mean, we have no idea what this kid's going to be. Like, he's 9 years old. I'm not even going to start making projections. I'm watching how he's going about his business, and we start talking about the concept of balance. We start talking about fluidity through his delivery. We talk about the focal points. Focal points are one of my favorite things to talk about with a kid. Like, hey, if we're aiming at the glove and the ball keeps hitting the dirt, are we going to keep aiming at the glove and keep hitting the dirt? No, let's aim at the catcher's forehead. Oh, the ball hit the glove. All right, let's keep doing that. Keep doing that. We start changing different concepts and how they think about their skill. I will never forget it. I got a phone call from his dad after one of the kids' tournaments, and he struggled throwing strikes. And I told his dad, I was like, hey, I understand that we live in this world of immediacy. We want our kid to be very successful right now. We don't want to watch them struggle. It's painful to watch a kid struggle playing this game. But I was like, don't worry. He's going to be fine. We're going to be good. We met up the next day. We went through his throwing. We talked a little bit about focal points. We talked about confidence. Just go out and throw. Just play catch. Do what we're going to do. Have fun with it. The next weekend, I get a phone call from his dad. Oh, my gosh, that was so much fun. He threw 4 innings. He didn't give up a single hit. Didn't walk anybody. Man, he was pounding that zone. Man, that ball was flying. I'm like, that's awesome. And the next time when I saw the kid, he was beaming ear to ear because he'd had fun, he'd had success, and the two things went together. If I don't do anything else at that stage, I feel like that's a completely successful story in that aspect. Now, the kid's been with me for 2 more years. He's growing and he's getting even better. He'll be in high school in a few years, and I cannot wait to see how much that kid grows. But that right there was one of my most fun success stories, is just getting to see that transformation of confidence. From a younger age, confidence is probably one of the biggest things that I work on. Like, let's talk high school now. So I've got a kid, he's a junior this year. Phenomenal build for what he's going to be. Super skinny, scrawny, but he's just got all the intangibles you can ask for. He's whippy, he's athletic, he's fast and everything. But he kind of fights his body because he only weighs like 145 pounds. He's 6'2", 145. He's a rail. And so what we had to do is we started looking at his pitch metrics off Rapsodo. I mean, he's a super high spin guy, meaning he's got the ability to do some special things with this ball. He doesn't have a lot of mass behind him, so the velocity is going to come, but we want to make sure that he optimizes what he does. It's not a matter of trying to change his metrics. Like, he was an 85% spin efficient guy at best, meaning he was really turning his hand and cutting the ball. And we tried talking about kind of leading with the index finger, staying more behind it, and he just could not get that feeling. So we took him on the mound. We got video from different angles and started saying, hey, you're really collapsing this front knee. You're really getting lateral tilt on your shoulders because you're trying to force this baseball to do something that you don't have a lot of strength to provide it for. So what we did, we went through, and because he was crossing his body super hard, which was causing his knee to collapse, we put him on the outside we built a mound. It's got a 10-inch drop. I put him on the outside edge of it, and I said, all right, throw the baseball. But what if I fall off? I'm like, well, what if you're an athlete and you decide not to fall off? Mm-hmm. And he throws like 4 or 5, and all of a sudden his stride is right where we want it to be. Next thing we do is we go to the plyo wall. I put a heavy plyo ball in his glove hand, a little bit of an overweighted plyo ball in the back. We get him steady, and I put a PVC pipe basically just behind him in a mirror and say, this is your line. I don't want you to fall over it. I don't want you to let yourself cross yourself. Let your shoulders rotate. Find your natural arm slot. He does it, and he's like, oh my gosh, that feels really free. Like, that's a lot of fun throwing that ball. All right, let's put it together. In a matter of 30 minutes, he goes from a super high arm slotted guy, pulling his head, cutting the ball, falling over himself, to now he's got really great scap load, stable on his front leg, transfers his velocity. He went from 80, 82 in a bullpen to 85, 87 in the pen just because he cleaned up the way his body moves. And now we're sending out his videos and we're sending out his metrics, and people are like, all right, the body is now matching the metrics, and now we're really interested. So like that kind of stuff, learning who the athlete is, learning what they're doing, and kind of saying, hey, let's just take the most simple approach and fix the issues as they are and see what happens. You let the athlete be an athlete and see what happens.
I love how you talked about with the young kids, kind of that foundation of fun, a foundation of fun, and then build the details and the kind of the eliteness from there. Like you want to have that foundation of fun, but that doesn't mean it's just, and it's not inherently, baseball is not always going to be fun. Nothing in life is always fun. If it is, something's wrong. But I love how you have the foundation of fun with the young players. Something specific, it's hard to do for those listeners. It's hard to show those listeners that are just listening to this. But when you were talking about rotating, you said you show it on the video here. Like I saw you on the video going like Tim Lincecum. He was tilted up, and I'm really a big, I've been watching baseball for 30 something years. I played for 18 and I've coached for 15. And something that's really struck, and this goes with anything in life too. And actually I learned it from something that's not even related to baseball. I call it the spider flaw. So like Tim Lincecum, he did good in college. He did really good in college. He did really good in he's one side. I mean, had a great, albeit a little shorter than some of those guys that he got rode out a little bit because of injuries and stuff. But I'll tell you what, it's like Weaver. I said the same thing about Jared Weaver. These guys were super successful in spite of some things. They had some real strong tilt with their stuff. That I tell young players, be careful when you copy certain players. That this kid was probably doing it that you're working with. This young man was probably doing it because of some the physical issues. But it also kind of makes me think about like young players, coaches. Don't just pick any old random professional and go, oh, well, Bryce Harper's a stud, I'm going to copy X, Y, and Z, because he may be great at X and Y, but Z may not be there. But the dude has massive hands. He's got a massive frame. He's got genetics that are, in the 99th percentile, like Weaver's hands were so enormous. Weaver would hold a baseball, and it was like a golf ball, and he was 6'7". He could dunk a basketball. I watched Jared Weaver dunk a basketball at 5:45 a.m. before like a Monday workout at Long Beach State. The dude still had his pajamas on. He just tomahawks it. It wasn't like, I'm going to get over the rim. He tomahawks it. I'm like, oh, wow. I stood in for a bullpen for the guy the first time. I stood in many times, but I stood in the first time. I didn't see the ball come out of his hand because he just had these humongous hands. So, it's like, would I tell everybody to stride like Jared Weaver? He would stride really closed off. Lincecum would really arch his back a lot. So I think that kind of makes me kind of want to share a point to listeners. And, your young athlete might have said, well, hey, coach, look, Lincecum does it. I mean, there's really only one guy that, like, maybe like pitching wise, like a couple that are so perfect, pretty close, 98%, like a Pedro Martinez. The guys hitting wise, like Mike Trout. But everybody else probably has a flaw. You got to be careful when you're coaching to that flaw. And so I call it in spite of flaw. He's great in spite of a flaw here, a flaw there.
Yeah, no, you get a lot of that, especially now in the fact that we can access all these players. You get to see all these games. People do more breakdowns on people. Like, oh man, he's someone I want to emulate. Yeah, you can emulate a guy all you want to, but don't be that guy. You're not that guy. He doesn't want you to be him. He wants you to be you. Like, you have to understand who you are as an athlete, how well you move, what makes you successful. If you try to be somebody else, you're not going to be able to optimize your personal athleticism. I think one of the coolest stories is when you bring up Tim Lincecum is Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer is a small guy. He's got tons of range of motion, and his dad helped him engineer himself to kind of emulate really, really closely to what Tim Lincecum did. But Tim Lincecum started having injuries. Bauer started having injuries. And I don't know Trevor or anything like that, but he had to re-engineer his delivery to meet who he was, not trying to do all these other things. And as much as everyone says he's not an athlete, you have to be athletic to be able to do what he does in certain components. But he's optimized his delivery to who he is now. And now we're seeing so much more success from him. When you start learning who you are and what you can be, your game will just take off like crazy.
I think we need Bauer. We need to send this episode to Trevor and say, Trevor, you need to start pitching like you tweet and like you talk online, because he is just he's himself. He's just himself. I love it. I love when he does that. You can agree or not agree, but I love how he's just saying what he's thinking, and I think he's calculated in a lot of things. I don't always agree with them, but hey, Trevor, just stick with don't copy other people. Be yourself like you're being with your tweets and things like that. So I think that's something that I just see as a big flaw with youth players is copying, and I've struggled with that. Like, they come to you and they say, Coach, so and so does this. I wanted to be like Ruben Sierra. He would like put his bat over his head and kind of wiggle it. And then Gary Sheffield. Like I wanted to be like Gary Sheffield and these guys, but like those dudes were animals with forearms. Their forearms were bigger than tree trunks and they could whip that bat. Like I was trying to do it when I was in 7th grade and like that bat, it took me a second and a half just to get into a normal hitting spot where I should have started in the first place. So, I just call it the spider flaw. So that's something young players, if you're listening, coaches, Here's the last thing I want to end on that part with is my recommendation, and I tell this to young coaches and dads, especially that aren't, or moms that aren't especially into the baseball, and they want to be good. But one of the things I think you can learn a lot from is looking at commonalities with all the great long-term pitchers or long-term athletes. Never look at somebody who's got a short career. You can, but I'm telling you, the best thing I recommend is look for pitchers specifically that had like 15-year careers that were consistently good, maybe with multiple teams, multiple different catchers. Typically that's the case. It's kind of like the Brady Belichick, how are they going to do without each other? In baseball, you get a little more separation because the lineups and the catchers and things switch around. But look at the commonalities. Tom House, who was way ahead of a lot of, he doesn't get enough credit. Tom House doesn't get enough credit with the stuff like the plyo balls and things. And he was saying this stuff, I actually went to Driveline recently. Loved it. I had a great visit over there at Driveline. I flew over, had a great visit, loved what they're doing. I love that stuff. I love the plyo balls. I've had guys doing that. But I think, Tom House was kind of on that years ago. And he actually made a book that was just basically taking pictures of like the great pitchers and just saying, what do they all have in common? And what are they doing in common? What are their common movements? And he wasn't right on everything, but I'll tell you one thing that he really did great with looking at, Randy Johnson, Maddox, Clemens, some of these guys, that had long careers, Pedro Martinez that had long careers, they won 200, 300 games. Not that wins are really that important because, your team could suck, but they had long careers enough to win a lot of games and they had consistency. What were they doing similarly to each other? And I'm glad you brought that up because it kind of brought up a point that I think is really important for youth players and anybody, even pro players. So be yourself. Be yourself. I love that. Be yourself insofar as you're not trying to redefine the laws of physics either. So you're big on the athletic pitcher. I'm a big fan of athletic pitchers. In fact, I think a lot of successful pitchers, I know we just talked about Bauer. He always states he wasn't an athlete. He's not an athlete. He didn't play multiple sports necessarily growing up. You played multiple sports. I played multiple sports. I think being athletic is a big benefit, but how do you train that? What are some recommendations for listeners, coaches to train? What are some specific things you would recommend to training the athleticism in pitchers specifically and maybe even just baseball players?
Go sprint.
Yeah.
Sprinting is the definition of athleticism. Are you fast or you're not fast? What is wrong with your sprint technique that you aren't fast? I think that's one of the biggest things in the world. I talk to strength and conditioning guys. I talk to track coaches. There's a gentleman that lives about an hour and a half north of me who, as we keep going, I may have to introduce you to him and have you talk to him. He's training some really special athletes, and he goes from a very simplistic manner of we're going to sprint, we're going to jump, and we're going to move weight, and we're going to do it in the most athletic manner we can. And he's getting a lot of really good success out of it. Look at how the body can produce energy. So broad jumping. Can you broad jump very far? No? Well, you're probably not using your body very well. What's your vertical? Right now we're talking all lower half. There's a big component to that. If your body can't generate energy in an athletic manner, it's going to struggle to do it in trying to perform a sport-specific movement. I'm really a big fan of 2-pound med ball throws. So with pitchers, I want to try and give them something that allows us to best duplicate, replicate, whatever you want to call it, mimic their delivery without incorporating the arm. I want to show them what their body is capable of producing rather than letting them get away with potentially overriding their delivery with maybe a really quick twitch arm or a late pull down or something like that. So we do 2-pound med balls, which I've got video of overlay literally showing that it is kinematically the same thing until it comes to separation and the rotation of the arm. There's a lot of people that have done a lot of things with this, especially Top Velocity. They really coined the 2-pound med ball throw, and I learned what they do with them, and I've incorporated it. If a guy can't throw a 2-pound med ball 40 miles an hour, I know he can't generate enough force with his body to do X amount of velocity. If I've got a kid that is throwing, let's say, 85, and he's only able to throw that 2-pound med ball 33, 34, he's putting a lot of stress on his arm to be able to do this. There are really strong correlations that you can pick out and see, and that's where you get to start exposing the body flaws, not the arm.
So
understanding.
let me jump in real quick. Let me jump in on that. So
Absolutely.
So you use the ball to find flaws or also to produce athleticism in the throw?
Both.
Okay.
So, like, let's say I've got a kid that really likes to yank his head and throw. I'm going to put that 2-pound med ball in there, tell him to keep his eyes in his chin, and I'm going to have him throw that ball without moving his head. If he can't do that, not only are we really accentuating and showing him what that flaw is, but then he starts to get an understanding of, oh man, the shoulders can rotate around the spine. That's freaky. And if the shoulders can rotate around the spine, what happens when the arm gets extended? Oh, I get to actually use my arm speed. So yes, we are not only teaching the delivery from the 2-pound med ball, but we're also showing and exposing and changing those flaws by just really, it's putting a mirror up to the athlete and letting him see what he's actually doing.
That's cool. You talked about sprints. I'm a big fan of sprinting backwards also. And like you said, you did broad jumps. I'm a big fan of side lateral jumps, just athletic movements. I love that. I love what you said there. I'll tell you what, if you're not doing it, sounds like you're into the sprint stuff and some of that. I tell young coaches or even anybody advanced, I said, just don't bother with much jogging at all. I just athletic movements, whether it's just shuffling, jumping, broad jumping, vertical jump, sprints, backward sprints. Just get athletic, and tire them out that way. The whole prescription was for years was just go run 30, run poles, run 30 minutes, this and that. Never once been tired pitching, ever. I threw 120 pitches in a game in Little League. I threw 100 and something in high school, and I pitched some, longer innings in college or this on hot days. I'm like, I never got tired. Is that because I went and ran, or is it just because pitching and baseball in general is not necessarily an aerobic sport? And so I think it kind of plays in, like if you're like, well, hey, you want to be a hockey player, right? A hockey player is got to be both. They got to be able to go and go, really no stop. Obviously they have the ice, the shifts and stuff, but they also have to be fast, quick, in a lot of different movements. I mean, I'll tell you, actually that makes me think, I think we should get all our pitchers on rollerblades in Texas and up in Wyoming, get them on ice skates and let them get out there and move the hips. I bet those guys would be really good athletes after doing that. But anyways, I don't want to get off on a tangent.
Well, let me throw this back at you though. Like what you just talked about is, let's put hockey or soccer or something like that. Think about the sports that don't have a time clock. So baseball not having a time clock, that's why we have to have such dynamic, explosive movements, is because we're not constrained. Like we have to get a certain number of outs before we have to worry about anything else. You're rushing the clock to try and score as many times as you can during that amount of period. So, I mean, understanding the difference between the sports, and I think that's where multi-sport concepts come in, is you have these different constraints on your athleticism that trains different aspects of your athleticism. That's where, like, especially here in America, that's why we do prize multi-sport athletes, because they get exposure to different athletic concepts. Does that mean that a guy that only plays baseball can't be a really great athlete? No, but they just get exposed to different things. I've got friends that are minor league pitching coordinators right now that say, hey, man, I've got this Latin American kid that has never done anything except play baseball, throw coconuts, and do all this kind of stuff. He's a freaking good athlete. Well, that's what he trained to do. He went out and did sprints in the sand. He held a stick and jumped over things. Like, he trained dynamic athleticism, and he didn't have to do it in other sports. So there's a difference in cultures to be able to do that, but there's value in different versions of athleticism.
I think you put that really well. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books on baseball. I listen to a lot of stuff. How you just described that, I think, is probably the best I've heard it put, in that the question always is, like, is a multi-sport athlete, is being a multi-sport athlete better for baseball players when they're young or not? And I think it was the whole black and white thing we talked about, kind of, I don't know if that was off the air or on the air, it was like the black and white fallacy. Like, it's not black and white. Like, it doesn't the multi-sport athlete doesn't necessarily going to mean that you can be a single sport, just baseball athlete. But like you said, you explained it really well. You got to really facilitate the training and facilitate the movements within a training. So you got to be more creative within the training. You got to be more outside the box within the training. I absolutely think you can be a single sport. Here's the caveat though. See, I look at the multi-sport athlete when you're younger as better for the mind, as kind of a break. And, I was eager to get into baseball after playing football and basketball. And you were a multi-sport athlete. That mental break is huge. When it came to being athletic, I think that you can train the athlete really well in just one sport, but you got to be real creative with your training, and it can't just be play games, because that gets very linear.
Yes.
You're only in baseball, you're making a lot of left turns, you're not making right turns, you're not really backing up a lot, you're not doing things that can get a lot of the hips moving in a lot of different directions. But I think how you said that was perfect. Like, yeah, I think this whole we could literally squash this whole like which one's better. It's well, if a baseball player doesn't train in a lot of modalities to get athletic, then it would probably have been better if he played a lot of different sports. Or the guy who played a lot of different sports, not necessarily going to be, now if you can really get, the best, but then you have the player that played a lot of sports and then he's fresh mentally. Now if you can get a diehard baseball person, and I've coached a couple of these kids that are diehard baseball, they can play 12 months, they can play, if they lived to 150, they'd never stop playing if their arms stayed attached and their legs were good. These kids are the very, very, very few that just, they have a drive and it's just like this thirst for baseball. With those guys, then you gotta hope that you get those like one out of like 500,000, one out of 100,000, one out of whatever it is, and then from there you got to be really creative with your training, because baseball training by and large for years has been very one-dimensional. I'm a big movement guy. I just think you got to move and you got to move quick. I love what you said about the sprints and things like that. So you talked about athleticism. I love how you talked about the plyo balls, building some athleticism in the arm, and also exposing flaws. I love how you talk about rotating the torso, rotating around the torso, rotating around the spine, rotating around the spine instead of tilting. I think that's huge. I tell pitchers, go watch Pedro Martinez, and only would I say watch one guy because I know he does it like a lot of the greats. Watch Maddox. Maddox has been getting some footage put out on Twitter recently, and Maddox is, when he's younger, he's tilting, right?
Oh my gosh, I was watching that this morning, and I'm like, is that Greg Maddox?
Yep.
He was stumbling over himself. He was arching his back, but I will say this, though, and when he dialed in, when he was actually throwing, he turned up the intensity, and his athleticism got better. He was obviously working on something. He was just kind of warming himself up, but he changed when he added higher levels of intent. I will say that.
Yeah, well, he definitely did look. That was a good observation. His warm-up throws were definitely a little bit more with the arched back, the kind of that Lincecum look. But I even during the game, that was in minor league footage, I believe, and I'm thinking you saw the same thing when he was with the Cubs. If you look at his older footage as when he was with the Braves, he's definitely, his spine, he has the best torso posture. Although he went a little slower down the slope, he wasn't aggressive with his delivery as some pitchers, and that probably allowed him to stay in that really nice torso, hip, spine angle and stuff. Man, that guy was a stud. So to finish it up here, Colter, this has been great. I want to have you back on your website. You got a KPI chart, a key performance indicator chart. That's big stuff in business, in the business world, keep KPIs, things like that. Kind of like well, I'll let you explain it. I thought it was fascinating. What are the pros? What is it, the purpose? And what are also some limitations that you just want? Obviously it's not an end all be all, but it's a great thing to gauge, especially for players and coaches and dads who have no idea how good a player is supposed to be in different things.
Well, so you mentioned it in the business world. There's buzzwords that always kind of infiltrate industries and whatnot, and KPI is currently one of them. Levels of performance and standards are always going to be there, how we label it and whatnot. But there's been a lot of tables out there that have included velocity and long toss distance. And there's multiple things that have come out with it. I've even seen a really cool one by Ben Brewster that came out with talking about here's what your velocity is at this age, and how you taper it according to your intent level should show what your potential can be. And I was like, whoa, that's way beyond my level, whatever. What I was looking at was elite talent is an elite skill set going to actually make you a better ball player. It gives you the opportunity to do it. It gives you the opportunity to play at a higher level and do different things, but you still have to be able to perform within the constraints of the game. There's skill appropriate levels saying you are average, below average, above average, or elite in terms of what your skill, like your talent level is. But how are you producing that in the game? That's where your KPIs are. How many strikeouts or how many strikes are you throwing in a game? Like, what's your strike percentage? You can throw 100 miles an hour, but if you throw 20% strikes, you probably aren't doing very much. If you're throwing your breaking ball, can you throw that for a strike? I don't care if you throw a 3,500 RPM curveball, which would be the world's best curveball in certain circles. But if guys aren't swinging at it, or you're not able to locate it, does it do you any good? are you walking a ton of people? Which, I mean, obviously isn't the same conversation, but like I sit in with my athletes when scouts come and do in-home visits with them, and they say, man, you've got the skills, you've got the velocity, you have the tools that we want to see, but we need to see you put into practice. If you can't go for more than 7 innings without walking like 3 or 4 guys, you're probably going to struggle at the next level. That's really valuable to know. It really just kind of goes into, you've got multiple aspects of this game, and if you are elite in one and you are really below average in another, it's not saying that you're an average ball player. They don't work together. They're not correlating. It says, I've got one thing and I'm completely out of balance with the other. My philosophy says, I want to try and be elite in my performance, and I want to try and optimize what my body is able to do. If I can't throw 95, I can't throw 95. I'm going to exhaust every option that I can to find out how hard I can throw, but I still need to perform at an elite level in my game to be able to get the job done, get 27 outs and help my team win.
Yeah, I love how you put that together and how you explained it there. It's kind of an all-encompassing thing. You know, I like those measuring sticks. There's going to be the Maddoxes who dominate and some players that get picked up that don't throw, super hard. Yeah, definitely. And I think, that's great. There's going to be the Hendricks. There's going to be those guys. But it is kind of nice for players to have some kind of measuring, some bar to measure themselves up against. I liked how it was just kind of like, hey, where you at on this? Now, if they sit there and think about that all the time, then they're not working the process. Another thing is, I think it's really great for young coaches to understand the strike ball percentage. I love how you had that on there. As you get older, I would even change it up to like elite, like college level, or even elite high school. Pro guys, it would be like, how often does the glove move? You give them like, say, 6 inches. If the glove moves less than 6 inches, that's a target. If it's not, it's a miss. Something like that, because we all know not all strikes are great. With that said, youth players, yes, it's great. Strike percentage, you shouldn't get into too much about, when you're talking to a 9-year-old, you worked with that 10-year-old, that's strike percentage. Hey, this is where you're at. You're at 51% strikes. Look, this is where this is an elite level. I love how you broke it down. I think it's just an extra little thing, a gauge. I wouldn't, I just think it's a cool little thing. I love how you color coded it. It's really well put together and everything.
The color coding's a fun thing because I did it with a little bit of a subliminal message in there. So I went through like karate belt colors. So as you advance in age, you need to be advancing in obviously your skill. And like Alan Jaeger always talks about, like, are you a 10th degree black belt doing this? Like that, I think that's a great concept. But something that I basically have to simplify in that whole thing is control what you can control. Can you control that you are 5'4" at the age of 15? Sorry, but no, you can't. Can you control whether or not you work on your ability to execute your pitches and command it? Absolutely, you can. Is that going to get you drafted? Probably not. You can only control what you can control. Yes, you have to have a certain level of skill or talent to be able to get seen, get your foot in the door, and be able to compete at a certain level. But you have to control what you can control. I know guys in Division I baseball right now that are winning ball games throwing 85 to 88. I know guys that are throwing 94, 97 that are winning ball games. They're still having to execute and do their job. You can control what you have control of. And I think that's the most valuable thing that you can tell a kid.
Yeah, I think how you explained it's great there, and it's just another resource. What we're talking about for the listeners is it's a, you call it a key performance indicator chart. It's a really cool chart, and it breaks down basically all the way. What's it start at, like 8 or 9 or 10?
9U.
9U. It starts at 9-year-old and goes all the way through like the professional, kind of the elite up. So goes through 18, and I think from 18 you went to college and then pro.
Yeah, college plus.
And so if you have no idea, a lot of times I hear, how hard should my, your son or daughter's throwing as hard as they're throwing. What do we need to do? Do we need to go see Coach Bostick? Who do we need to see in our area? Well, how can we get better? Do we need a better training program? Do we need to do something remotely if you live out in Cody, Wyoming? Do we need to find an indoor gym instead of waiting for it to thaw out? My point being is, like, it gives those, you and I know about exactly how hard or how much control and what a college or elite high school or youth or pro guy should look like. We can kind of go out there just like any good scout can do. But for those of you that are lawyers or construction or landscaping, or they work at a bank, or you have your own business and baseball's not really, you played a little bit, you're like, man, I can't remember how hard I was supposed to throw in high school. Well, it gives you kind of a nice indicator, performance indicators. It's not the end all be all, but it's a nice little kind of bar. Where am I at? Well, I'm way behind. Oh, control, control is not okay. And I like that. It's just kind of a nice thing. I love how you color coordinated it. it's just a nice thing for coaches and players to have, especially younger players, when it comes to strikes and ball percentage and just about kind of, where they should be, where should they be with arm strength and things like that. I think really just being upfront with the listeners, just one little thing. I know it's not, when you work with athletes, you probably don't even spend much time on that. You're really getting into a lot of other more detailed things and stuff, but that's a good little resource to go check out on your website. I want to finish up with one more question here. What's something you like to do with your pitchers to optimize their pitching delivery? What's something you're doing recently? What's one thing that you're having a lot of success with ironing out the pitching delivery that maybe you don't see as common in the baseball community? Maybe you don't see it out there a lot, but something that you like doing with your players, something that kind of separates you a little bit.
Ooh, well, I think the 2-pound med ball throws, the way that I incorporate them is kind of a little different than what a lot of people are doing with them. But I actually think one of the things that I'm doing that not many people are is I'm going out and I'm asking coaches, I'm asking guys that are either in the college ranks, professional ranks, doing whatever. I'm kind of asking them, what do you look for in terms of movement, like body movement, all these? And I kind of get their take on what they're looking for. And I start applying it in terms of conversation with my guys and say, hey, what is one area that you think you need to address? And then we go through their video and I say, these are the 4 areas that I'm looking to address. And when we hit common ground, we have that conversation and say, this is what we need to do. This is our plan of attack. And we go. I don't cookie cut anything for anybody. There are specific principles that we all need to follow to kind of accomplish A, B, and C. But how you do it, and so long as you do it, it's 100% up to you, your body, your athleticism. I think that's something that the individualization, the specificity by which I want to try and apply to different components of a person's delivery. I think that's kind of the difference. Fun story, I'm going to give this kid props on it. I've got a senior in high school this year. No lie, back in the summer when he was playing, he was topping out 84, 85. He had a game 79 to 81. And I love this kid to death. He's super, super strong. He does everything. He can long toss out to like 320. Like he's got everything, but he just couldn't get the velocity to go. And we had a lot of hard conversations and whatnot. We started realizing it's not the mechanic. His body, he's just going to move differently than everybody else. It was the way he processed the conversation about his mechanics. Yeah, he was so into like thinking, oh, I've got to hinge my hip. I've got to drive my weight. I've got to hold. And he was paralyzing himself from the concept of thinking what he had to do. He started steadily gaining, no doubt. Tuesday afternoon, this year, he's committed to a junior college. He's going to go and be phenomenal. I have no doubt. He's got one of the best sliders I've ever seen. He hit 92.4. A guy that was 79 to 81 less than a year ago, pitching in fall ball games at 83, 84, having the hardest time in the world. Hit 92.4 on Tuesday. And I'm not going to say it was mechanics. He still throws almost identical to what he was throwing back in the summer. We've cleaned up a little bit. We've gotten him to understand a little bit, but it was mostly his intent. And it only came out from having more specified conversations with him and getting to know who he was and how he thought. And I think that was the most important thing we could have done for him.
And this is so huge for coaches, and I think it gets kind of convoluted in the baseball community, is there's no cookie cutter approach. I completely agree when it comes to how we address and discuss and share a message and work with each of our players and pitchers and athletes. Each one of them may have a different, you may find 2 or 3 that you can share the same message with and it clicks the same because they have similar personalities and their vocabulary is similar and their upbringing was a little more similar. But you have to use specificity with the delivery of what you're trying to, and the message. Then the other thing that gets kind of screwed up a little bit is the laws of physics, the laws of physiology. Like our bodies are not all that much different. They are, definitely, but they're not all that much different. But the way we perceive in our backgrounds mentally and our upbringing, our story, our history, things that have gone on in our household when we were younger, school experiences, our coaching experience, right? It's kind of like the men are from Mars, women are from Venus book. You hear different things, they're speaking in 2 different languages, and that's so big. This gets thrown a lot around in baseball community is everybody goes, well, there's no cookie cutter approach. And then they stop right there. And I even did a whole article on this. I said, context is king when it comes to this. There's certain things I would tell almost all, not all, but like 98. There's some submarine guys I've worked with. I would definitely, change a little, a knuckleball pitcher. But 98% of the pitchers, some of the physical things are you really want them to be similar. Their hip movements, things like that, direction, some momentum. But how they train, the drills you use, how you explain it to them, that's all going to vary a little bit. You know, you could, hey, if you try to, you may hit lightning in a bottle when tell a team of 12 players all one message and they all shake their head, coach, I get it, and they run out there and do it, but that's not going to happen.
I think this is one of the funniest things it happens a lot. People ask me, like, Colter, what did you major in college? Were you a biomechanics, or did you study kinesiology? And I'm like, nah, I was an English communications major. And they're like, what? So you can learn. You can go out. I learn about body movements. I learn about strength and conditioning. I learn all of these things that I apply. But my ability to communicate with my players is probably the most valuable thing that I have. It's my ability to relate and build relationships with these kids. I want them to know that I care. I want them to know that they can trust me with what we're doing. I want them to know that failure is not necessarily a negative thing. I want them to be able to fail and understand that we're going to go back to the drawing board and get it right the next time, but trust me enough to do what I ask or what we come up together with to put it into place with 100% confidence and go out and try to compete. I think that's the bridge that a lot of people, they want to get to, but they don't ever really fully embrace it is, hey, I'm the coach. I'm going to tell you what to do, and this is how it needs to be done. If the kid doesn't buy in, the kid doesn't understand, or they really don't trust it, they're not going to give you 100% of their commitment, and it's never going to work out the way you want it to. I always knew kind of in the back of my mind when I was growing up, man, if I don't trust you as a coach, I'm probably not going to listen to you. But now in my capacity and talking with other coaches that I trust and respect, it comes down to the relationship with the player. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter if they're 9, 18, 20, whatever. If you don't have the relationship, you don't have all of your investment ready to go.
The first thing you said there was the bridge between what you know and getting it to them, and then them understanding it and doing it and applying it. You know, I taught for 15 years full-time as a high school teacher, and 12 and a half years full-time, and then I did basically full-time substitute teaching. And I worked inner city. I worked kids from Watts, Compton, some of the worst neighborhoods. Yeah, these kids are tough. They were the hardest nuts to crack. They were the hardest shells. I worked with teachers, and I said what you said. You said, I used to say the metaphor of a bridge. Every student or every player that comes onto your team or into your program or into your facility is gonna be on the other side of a bridge. That bridge may be across the Mississippi River, or it may be across a little puddle of the Rio Grande down there near you in San Antonio. You know, it may be that bridge may be, there's some kids who come from very trustworthy parents and very trusting upbringings. So they are like a small 5-foot bridge across a little creek. But then you have some that have been so lied to and had bad experience with the coaches that they are literally a mile across on this mile-long bridge, and it's going to take some time. You know, you hear this a lot, they don't care what you know until they know you care. So you got to build that bridge. I love how you started off, it's the bridge. So you can know as much as you want, but you got to be able to communicate it. I love it. Building the connection, the foundation. Well, that's great, man. I'll tell you what, Colter, this has been a blast. I love talking shop. I want to get you back on here and go over the mental game. And Colter, what's the best way to get in contact with you for players, for coaches? What's the best way to reach? I know you're on Twitter. I know you got your website. What's the best way?
Best way is probably Twitter. That's my primary platform. You brought up Facebook and whatnot. I use Facebook and Instagram to post about my dogs and the food that I cook, just because that's therapeutic. That's about as far as I go. Twitter is where I talk baseball, and it's not about anything else other than making sure that we're getting information out to people, doing it in a good, positive way. And so if people want to shoot me a direct message or otherwise reach out to me, I'm always down to talk.
I'll tell you what, you're a great follow on Twitter. You're positive, adding value. I love that. You're sharing stuff. You're showing great stuff. I'll tell you what, anybody that's listening should just go and follow you and go check out the website, Maximize Baseball. And if you're in the San Antonio area, try to get up with Colter here. And I'd love to have you back on down the road here, and maybe in the near future.
100%.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you next time.
Appreciate it.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Experience.
This is a really good team, and so you have to earn everything you have against them and take opportunities when they present themselves.
Take it to the field.